So don't squint too hard. This is on LassoTech/Async. It's a template, and I created it, I don't know, a couple of years ago when I was working on some stuff. And this just makes it a lot easier. So what this does is this template will automatically copy all the page vars into the asynchronous thread. And that's the secret, is I put everything I need for the synchronous thread in page variables, and then I use this template, and then all I have to do is just start using the page variables. I don't have to, this will recreate all the page vars, and it also has two other special things which we're going to talk about next. Yeah, this is just an extra slide telling you that I copied everything via values. All right, so the two things that are very important for asynchronous threads, one is the execution time limit. That tells Lasso how long you want to allow this thread to run. And if it takes longer than what this allows, Lasso will terminate it. So what I recommend is, unless it's a thread that you want to run continuously, my suggestion is you set it for something slightly longer than what it should normally take. And the thing about this one is that you have to, if you do a lot of testing at the beginning of, you roll out a new product, you have this asynchronous thread and it works great, and then 6 months down the road, you're noticing that your nightly routine that does, that was processing 100 records a night suddenly doesn't work anymore, and now it stops after 150, and you have 300 that are supposed to be processed. Go back and look at this, because probably what's happened is it's now taking longer than what you originally allowed. Of course, you could allow it to run forever, but then you run the risk of these threads running amok and taking your server down. The priority, I always set the low. It can either be low or high. Generally speaking, I don't have a big rush to have it finish whatever it's doing, and I'm offloading it so that I save more of my processing time for the user. So in general, I set it for low unless it's for some reason I really need it to come high. All right, so we're going to talk about the 3 different criteria and go through some examples. So offloading tasks, like I said earlier, it's good for improving the response time to the end user. The type of task that's well suited for it is one that takes a long time but doesn't need any sort of output to go back to the user immediately. So if you have something that it chugs away and then it's supposed to tell the user, all right, I imported 50 and 30 were errors, that's not going to be a very good candidate for using asynchronous threads, because you won't have those numbers available. You can still use asynchronous threads, but it just means that that kind of reporting has to happen someplace else, not on the page that gets returned to them, but on a dashboard or something, see the results of your import. So here's a simple example of a task that's perfect for offloading. Here's a loop, it creates 500 records, right? And at the end of it, all it says to the user is, thanks for waiting. Assume that took like a minute and a half. So the user doesn't really need to wait around for that thanks for waiting. Instead, what we're going to do is we take that template I had. It's the exact template. All I've done is the comment that was here that says put your code here. I put the code right there. And then after the synchronous part, I put what I wanted to go back to the user, which says thanks for waiting. So what's going to happen is Lasso's going to, if you were to load this page, creating all these records, the page would come back like that, and the records would be creating in the background. Now, the thing, too, to remember about asynchronous threads is that you don't have a guarantee of when it will start and when it will stop. So this particular synchronous thread has a definite beginning and end, but it could start after the page has been returned back to the user, or it could start while it's still working on returning to the user, and it may or may not end right away. It just with a low priority, there's no guarantees. Typically, I find that it happens usually fairly within a second or two of when you return the page back to the user. Current events, these are, like I said, these are handy for things that you want to have happen continuously. You just want this process to run for as long as Lasso's running. And it's handy for like email queue and whatnot. The thing to remember about this, though, is since it's continuously running, the most important part of a recurring event is to make sure you have that thread sleep. Because if you don't have it sleep, it'll just go chug through this while loop, and it'll be Lasso spinning its wheels. And if you have several of these, it'll take your server down. So The other important thing to remember is you have to give it a time limit of 0. That tells Lasso, I don't care how long this takes, it can just go forever. Without that, Lasso will eventually terminate it. And then you wonder why your recurring event isn't recurring anymore. And then also, I made mention that if you really wanted to, the email queue works like this, where you can terminate your recurring event with a global. So instead of while always true, instead it can be while global equals on. Then you don't want that thread to run, rather than having to restart Lasso to kill it, you can instead set that global to false.